So we were talking about the relationship between Alex and Elaine.
The relationship between Alex and Elaine was very, very special because, well, Judd and I had a lot of chemistry together anyway. I mean, what's funny is I didn't really talk to him that much, and I'd seen him in New York in Chapter 2 and was such a fan. And we'd been working together for a couple weeks, and then they did a story on TV Guide about me. We'd started together on July the 5th, and it was on October the 2nd. I was talking to the TV Guide article guy, and he said, well, I talked to some of the guys about you, and I actually have a marriage proposal for you from one of the guys. I said, Tony? And he said, no, blah, blah, blah. And I go through everybody. He said, no, Judd. And I went, Judd? Judd never even talks to me. What are you talking about? Anyway, so I went up to him the next day and I went, well, I accept, So it started this like sparky thing. And then of course, within a couple months we were dating each other, and within a month we were dating each other. And, he's one of my favorite people ever. I love him. We had a great time dating and then working together. After we stopped dating, it didn't matter. I mean, people go, well, you dated two of your co-stars, Tony and Judd. And I say, hey, we were on 5 years. It was 77 guys connected to the project one way or the other every single day. I think two, that's pretty good. Those are pretty good odds. And we're all still great friends. We were all still like really close, and it didn't seem to affect anybody in a negative way. But anyway, so there was this spark between Alex and Elaine, and it wasn't really, it was one of my favorite episodes for me was Nardo Loses Her Marbles, and that was shot on August the 24th of 1979, and it was basically where I'm like, kind of losing it, doing too much, a little bit hyper. I go crazy at this art exhibit, and Judd kind of carries me out of there and rescues me kind of, and I'm fighting with him in the car, and he and I are talking to each other, and all of a sudden I have this like, oh, well, what if I need a shoulder to cry on and this and that, and I said, what if I need something else? And I kiss him, and he pulls away from me. I say, come on, why not? And he says, no. I said, come on, you've never been attracted to me? He said, once, the day you wore that red and white striped dress, right? So anyway, he makes me go and see a therapist. I go and see a therapist played by Tom Ewell, and I have this little breakdown scene, and it was really a very good episode for me. And then of course the tag is I show up in the garage in the red and white striped dress. So that was kind of laying the groundwork so that maybe there was some kind of attraction between those two characters. That was second season, and it wasn't until really the beginning of fourth season that anything was realized in an episode called Vienna Waits. So, yeah, and so Vienna Waits episode, he is going to Europe. I decide to go. I'm going to go. I'm free as a bird. I talk him into coming with me. We talk about the fact that, he says, well, I don't know, I might, have this steamy girl, blah, blah. It's like, fine, you go off with, and I'll go off with Aldo, and we'll have fun. So now I go to Europe. Elaine goes to Europe. I meet somebody on the plane. Every city we go to, I've got a date, whether it's a Greek fisherman or, somebody who's in England and all these things. Finally, the last night in Vienna, we have this thing. He says, I wanted that night. And I say, well, we've seen each other ugly and sad and this and that. Maybe our relationship can withstand one night of love, and so we go off together. So now they've done the deed, but then it was back to usual at the garage. The other time it was kind of intimated that there was a thing between us was when Simca comes into the garage during the whole scene skis with a marriage, and that was at the beginning of fourth season. That was that was shot in August of. I'm not going to do dates anymore. Anyway, so we shoot scene skis from a marriage, and she comes into the garage, and we have this girl talk thing, and she asks me about Alex. And I say, even if I did, I probably wouldn't tell you, So anyway, so there was always this underlying current, but he had dates, I had dates. We didn't get fixed up at the Schlugel. There were so many other things that went on. But I think they always really adored one another and felt like they were best friends through it all.
Would you have ever wanted to see them actually date and end up together?
Oh, wait, I forgot one of my favorite episodes where there was also this tremendous chemistry. It's when Elaine's, old friend, I have to lie about some guy I'm dating. So Bill bored. And so we go out with the other couple and he says, I'm going to be the best date you ever had. And he goes out and there's this chemistry and stuff. Anyway, we end up kissing. I say, come on, you never felt it when we were kissing back there. You didn't feel it? He says, no, nothing. And I say, really? Nothing? He goes, not a thing, nothing. And so then I kiss him again. So there were these little moments that they knew that they could always go to and rely not only on Elaine and Alex's chemistry, but also the chemistry between Judd and me. And so it was kind of a thread throughout the piece. What do I think? I don't know. I mean, yeah, sure, why not?
Talk a little bit about working with Tony Danza.
Oh, well, first of all, Tony is, Tony and I talk to Tony more than I talk to anybody from the cast. I would say Tony and Jim Brooks are my two closest friends by far. Tony, he's been to all my marriages, and I went to his wedding and his parents' funerals, and he knows my kids. I mean, we're really, really, really close friends. Tony, we used to make a joke that Tony would come in, he would lift the coffee machine. He would skate in or ride in on a car. He would lift me up in the air, practically bench press me, or throw me up against a wall and kiss me and rattle the cage and do something else. And Jimmy Burrows would say, is Tony in yet? Because there was just he's like the Tasmanian devil. He comes in and he's there. We always called each other the swizzle stick that stirs the drink because there was always this tremendous energy. He's fantastic and he's one of the nicest people and so much fun. I just absolutely adore him. And yes, we dated at the beginning of Taxi and then said, you're going to go off and have your adventures, and things were going on in my life, and but we always stayed great friends through everything, and he's absolutely one of my favorite people ever. So that's the personal side. Working with Tony Danza, he was just a really good go-to guy because he would have these moments where you just thought, wow, this guy's a great actor, and then he would have these crazy, funny Tony moments that you thought, oh my gosh, nobody else could play this part but him. They originally wanted Phil Banta. It was a character that was supposed to be kind of an Irish boxer. And but they saw Tony and they fell in love with him and just thought he would be so great in the show. And he was sexy and funny and had this great body. And everything that came out of his mouth about his character. It's like in the very first episode, when we're putting, quarters or dimes into this payphone, and it's just going through. He wants to call. He wants number 12. It's like he's going to go. He says, "Oh, the classiest girl I ever met." And then he says, "Hello, can I speak to number 12?" And it's the massage parlor, and wherever he was, Vietnam or something. And you believed him as a Vietnam vet. You believed him. You believed the antics. You believed him as a boxer, certainly. And when we shot the show, the first one was Like Father, Like Daughter, and then it was a blind date about Judd, and Suzanne Kent played the part of Angela, who was Jeff Conaway's, Bobby Wheeler's answering machine person. And so they end up going on a date. And then the third one was the great line where Randall Carver's character goes up to this girl, Suzanne, in a bar and says, "Do you want to get married?" And they get married. And then the fourth one was Come As You Aren't. It was about me in the art world. And the fifth one was One Punch Banta. And then the sixth one was Bobby's acting career. But the fifth one was One Punch Banta. It was such a strong show. And by that time, we'd all worked together for 5 weeks. So we really knew who the characters were. And it was such a solid premise. And everybody had their little moment that became the second episode that they put on the air. It wasn't any of the earlier ones. And so the first episode went on, which was the pilot introducing everybody. And then the second one was One Punch Banta. So that went on. And so, Tony it was great that he was able to be a boxer because he really was a boxer, and he really pulled all of that off.
Jeff Conaway.
My Jeff. Oh, Jeff was like my brother. I mean, I dated 2 of the guys, but Jeff was like my brother. Jeff was my grease buddy. We had spent a year together on the road. We knew each other so well. I'd have to say Jeff was probably the sweetest and most generous of all of the people in the show. He really was. He called you on holidays. He was just Jeff was really, he reminds me of my brother Tommy, but he was just the sweetest person. He, you know, a little crazy, a little wild, but like the biggest heart. I loved Jeff, and that I was connected to him through the two biggest things that, you know, the two biggest family, outside my own family, my other two big families were the Grease family and the Taxi family. And I was connected, you know, he was always the brother in both of those experiences for me. I think he was perfect for the part of Bobby, if for no other reason than his hair, you know, and he was so, you believed Jeff as an actor who might be struggling and whose ego would get in the way or couldn't get a job or, you know, whatever. I think I think the show was extremely well cast because, and then the writers, of course, took little pieces of all of us and our personalities and sort of, you know, used them in a way as well. So, you know, and Jeff certainly had his share of overacting moments. But what's funny is, like I remember there was one episode that Danny was saying, yeah, his toes were overacting. You know, it's like, oh, Jeff, such a sad story, such a sad story, so unnecessary. He was a great guy. Jeff was a great guy, really special. Yeah.
Randall Carver, who was there just the first season.
I think they wrote the character of John. They really thought that was going to be the breakout character. They thought that he was going to be the one that would take off. Like he and Judd start the show. He's going to be a cab driver, you know, or he ends up being a cab driver by the end of the first episode. And I think that they thought that was going to be the guy. But I think that Randall never found his footing with that character. And I don't think it was totally his fault, but Tony and Judd, who were around the same age, were so dynamic and had better drawn characters and just were more suited to their parts and seemed more natural saying those words, that I wasn't surprised when he was gone, because it was too many mouths to feed in that age group. I think that's what happened, you know. And then after, I mean, we did our first 7 episodes. The 7th episode, well, I told you the first 5, and then Bobby's Acting Crew was the 6th, and then the 7th one was the high school reunion show. And the night of the high school reunion show was September the 1st of 1978. And we had not seen Taxi at all. The show was about to go on September 12th, Tuesday, a week and a half later. But we were going to go on a 2-week hiatus. So the night of September 1st, we had a huge party with a band. They only had one, they were like a cover band, and they only had one good song, Oogie Boogie Oogie. But what happened was they pulled us into a room and we got to watch the first 3 episodes that we shot, and we could not believe what we were seeing. We just could not believe it that we were doing this show. It was just so great. I mean, the show was just so great. But the last episode we shot before we went on hiatus for the 2 weeks before the show was going to be on the air was when Bobby Wheeler goes as Louis De Palma to the reunion, because, you know, and Jeff I thought was just fantastic. He wanted to play this. He studied Danny all week and really worked hard to like capture the essence of Louis De Palma. And there was this huge stunt that happens at the end, and the whole place is a mess as a result. And that's how we went off on our like 2-week vacation, and then went to the party and then watched the 3 episodes, and we could not believe what we were seeing. Well, I went to Europe because I was dating John Travolta at the time, and so he went to open Grease, and I went to all the cities with him to show Grease. And what happened was September 15th, the show Taxi went on the air September the 12th, Tuesday night, and September 15th, all the guys had already planned this trip to New Orleans to see the Ali Spinks fight. Well, I was coming from Europe with Johnny, and we were going to the Ali Spinks fight. So we all met at the fight, and then after the fight, I went off with the Taxi guys for a while, and we were literally walking down the street, the whole group of us, and people were honking and honking and honking. It was the first time I'd ever been recognized from something I had done on television. And I looked at the reaction to the group of us walking down the street, and people were screaming, Louie, and, you know, Elaine, and our names already from one episode. And I thought, my life's about to change, and all of our lives are about to change.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we went into a strip club where the girl was singing The Best of My Love on a pole. She was doing like a dance. So whenever I hear The Best of My Love, I think about September 15th, 1978, Friday, Ali Spinks, being with my guys in New Orleans.
That's great. Did you guys go out in public a lot as a group like that?
Oh, we
Did you-
go out once in a while, but it's like this is way before social media,
Right.
so it's not like people were snapping pictures like crazy, But yeah, and we'd fly on planes together sometimes, and we'd do all kinds of things. Yeah, for sure.
Wow. So let's talk about a few other cast members. Christopher Lloyd.
Chris. Okay, so this is a good time to talk about him because the 8th episode we shot was one called Paper Marriage. And we had just come back from our trip. I was in Europe and then New Orleans. The show was on the air, and this was now, September the 18th, and Monday, September 18th, and we went to, our script was called Paper Marriage, where Latka's character has to stay in the country. Or no, Latka's character wants to stay in the country, so he has to get married. And so Vivian, this kind of street hooker, she's going to marry him, and Jeff, Bobby Wheeler, brings in his buddy, Reverend Jim Ignatowski, that he knows. So he comes in. When Chris walked on that stage, just the visual of him was crazy with that hair and his jean jacket and his rhythms. We used to do, before the show, we used to do a thing called, we called it an Italian run-through. The entire cast would do the show at a super speed. It was like warp speed. It was like 78. I mean, it was like crazy fast. We'd just do it as quickly as we possibly could. And Chris, no matter how fast we went, Reverend Jim never got up to the same speed because his rhythms were so different. He was such an original character and so his own kind of person. But he was so great in that episode that you could tell when they told us that he was going to come back the following year, and then he came in the 5th episode of that season, where Jim gets his license, and there's that very famous scene where what does the yellow light mean? Slow down. What does what does the yellow light mean? Slow down, over and over again. If you watch that episode, notice how I have a pencil and I'm literally digging it into my hand to keep myself from laughing. I mean, I for a long time, I think I had lead poisoning because of it, because the tip broke off. But he was so damn funny and total commitment to a character that you'd never seen before, and was just so unbelievably brilliant the way he delivered it week after week after week. You believed him. You believed that he had breeding. You believed that he had money at one time. You believed that he had education at one time. And you believed that he was a burnt-out hippie all at once. And could play the piano later on in Elegant Iggy, our 4th season. You believed every single thing that character did because Christopher Lloyd was so rooted in who that character was and was so genuine that you saw all of those things. I mean, he had so many levels operating for that character. Really special.
Carol Kane came on at the end.
Oh, my buddy Carol. Okay, so she came in to play Simca Doblitz with that voice, that personality, that hair, that creamy white skin, absolutely adorable. She came in and she was so good and so special and so oddball, and you believed that she was really from Latka's country. Now, Carol tells a story that he picked her up. First, he told her that they were going to go away to Cuba or something, or they were going to go far away, Mexico or something, or Europe or whatever. But then they went out to dinner, and he would not let her not speak in that language. So they ordered in the restaurant. She had to keep speaking in that language. He took her out, and I'm talking about total commitment. She was fantastic. They brought her back a couple times, and then 5th season she became a regular. And it started with the Schlugel and everything else. But their wedding was great. Danny DeVito played the violin, not in the Paper Marriage episode that he said in this. I saw his tape, and he didn't play the violin in that one. He played in the real wedding of Simca and Latka and Simca. Yeah, and Vinny Schiavelli was in it. I mean, it was so many. Dr. Joyce Brothers was in it. She came to their wedding. So there were so many, I mean, it was just great. But I always say that Andy Kaufman, they made up a country, but Andy Kaufman fleshed out a country and a language. He made a country that I wanted to visit. You just totally believe that place really existed, whether it was their war song or any of the histories or any of what's the word I'm looking for? Anything that's from their culture. Their what's the word I'm looking
Their
for?
background.
No, not their background. Their when a country has certain things that they do all the time. That like
Traditions.
Traditions. That's the word I was looking for. Tradition. No, that's what I was. Yeah, they're traditions. You believed that country had traditions, and you believed every tradition that it was. That he explained that they had, and she was fantastic. I wasn't surprised that she won an Emmy. She was so great when Latka cheats on her in order to save his life, and the two of them. As soon as Latka, Simka, you slept with another woman, and then in order to know the pain of infidelity, she has to then sleep with somebody from the garage. And so what happens is they have a party to decide who it is because she wants it to be Tony. And he's like, no, it's going to be Louie. And they go, all right, the only thing that's fair is who's the last man in. And then there's all this like funny kind of farcical play, and it turns out to be Judd. So she shows up at his apartment, and then, she says, see, Milky White, yours, now peel me like a grape so I can get out of here, things like that. But she was great. She was perfection, really special, and a good friend.
What was it like just having another woman around in the cast?
Well, Carol had been as a guest star, and she was so good, and we got along so well. So it was, I always say to people that, the thing about Taxi is we did 112 shows, had 112 parties. I know they say 114, but that was kind of a, a retrospective. And I went to sleep every night planning my outfit for the next day. I took my job as the girl very seriously, and I loved it. So having somebody to share it with, because it was Carol and she was such a doll, and we bonded right away and, went to lunch ourselves. And it was kind of fun. It was like, yeah, good. Somebody can help me with these guys,
So let's talk a little more about working with Andy Kaufman.
Okay. With all due respect to Jim Carrey's performance in Man on the Moon, I felt like he got the crazy a little too much of Andy, but he never got the heart. Andy had a great heart. He was like a good boy, and in many ways, his genius was that he could be the boy next door, the boy from the neighborhood, from Great Neck or wherever he was from, and then do something so crazy and different that it was that kind of yin-yang that made your head spin. He was very sweet. I told you that I had seen him at the Improv doing first The Great Gatsby as Foreign Man, and then whipping off the tape off the side of his pants and revealing studs and going into the greatest Elvis I've ever seen in my life. So he certainly was a performance artist, and I knew that going into it. And then I couldn't believe how sweet he was. He considered himself a song and dance man, and he liked the idea that I'd already done Broadway several times, and I'd worked with the Andrews Sisters, and that we, because later on there was the costume party episode where Danny, Tony, and Judd went as the Andrews Sisters. Andy, Tony, and Judd went as the Andrews Sisters. So I taught them their little dance and stuff. But Andy was nice. I mean, he had like 7 out of 13, so he wasn't in every episode. And he didn't come in on Mondays. He came in on Tuesdays. Mike Binder would come in and read the Andy parts. And what happened was he'd come in Tuesday for the afternoon run through. They'd walk him through. The script was always written in English, and then he would do his Latka gibberish, and you felt like you understood him after a while. And then he'd come in on Friday. So he had a very truncated schedule. And, I know people say, oh, he hated being on Taxi, or that's what Man on the Moon said, or whatever. When he was there, he didn't act like he hated it. And we certainly all got along really well. And I had many very good conversations with him. I flew with him a couple times. He and I ended up on the same plane for things. And he was a character. I mean, one of my favorite Andy stories that I love to tell, because it's sort of a shortened version of something. One day he walked in with this disgusting boil on the back of his neck. He had this boil, I'm not kidding, it was this size. It was like the size of a very large ping pong ball, golf ball. It was bigger than a ping pong ball or a golf ball. It was right on the back of his neck. And I said, that is horrible. He said, watch this. He made an announcement that the audience, for $1, if you wanted to, you could come up and touch Andy's boil. And like 100 people lined up to touch his boil and, paid him the $1. He was a provocateur, but you never knew, because he'd be sitting there and he'd have, those big eyes, and he'd be talking to you, and then all of a sudden something crazy would happen, come flying out of his mouth, So we worked together for a few months, and then on September the 29th it was this Friday, Ed Weinberger calls us all together, and he says, all right, the show next week, well, we have a guest star. Well, it's Andy, but it isn't Andy. Just play along. And we said, what? He said, well, it's going to be Andy, but it's not Andy, but okay, just play along. We said, okay, what does that mean? Okay, fine. So following Monday, October the 2nd, Monday, October 2nd, 1978, we go in, and all of a sudden, there's Andy Kaufman with like orange makeup, a fake nose, ugly toupee, glasses, big mustache, blue tuxedo, ruffled shirt, talking like this, chain smoking, rah, 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 like this. Who's this pretty lady? Come here, I'm Tony Clifton. And it was like, oh my God. And we were like looking at each other like, I remember Tony was like, what the, so we were all, okay. So now we sit around this table and do the table read. And this is what the acting was like. It was the episode where Danny DeVito, Louis De Palma's brother, is going to come back, he's a Vegas guy, and they're going to play cards to see who's going to get stuck with their mom, who's going to win or lose and get stuck with their mom for the holidays. So this is how he acted. Well, Ma, sometimes she's glad, sometimes she's sad. I mean, that's how bad his acting was, right? So now we're like humoring him, but by this time, the show's been on for like 3 weeks, and we love each other. We know we've got a hit on our hands. We're already bonded. We're 3 months in. It's like a well-oiled machine, and somebody from our cast is now playing Halloween a little bit early, but okay. So now Tuesday, we come in, he's got these little yapping dog things for us, these mechanical toys, he passes them out. People's nerves it was starting to wear on everybody's nerves, because he's not only not in the, we had dressing rooms all near each other so we could all like hang out and talk in between rehearsing. He's in a trailer right outside, and he's got these 2 hooker girls with him. So now we get to the Tuesday 4:30 run through, and it's like chaos. And it's horrible, horrible, horrible acting. I mean, just Tony Clifton is an embarrassment, and we're now angry. And it's like, you're not taking down Taxi, right? What is this shit? Everybody wanted to like run up and pull his nose off, but we still thought, okay, we'll talk to the producers. So the next day, we all called Ed together and said, this has got to stop. And they knew, because it was bad. It was really bad. So the next day, we come in Wednesday, and there's another actor, Richie Frangi, who's going to play the part. And we said, oh, phew, okay. We think, okay, well, we'll see Andy next week playing Latka next week. So Jimmy Burrows says, so they called Andy last night, and they told him that Tony is fired. Okay, just to give you a little background, I think what happened was they had seen Tony Clifton, and they had seen Tony Clifton open for Andy Kaufman. And our producers must have had bad seats or something, because they didn't realize it was the same person. But when they negotiated the contract with Andy, he told them that he wanted Tony Clifton to do 3 episodes. And they said, well, we don't know if Tony can handle it. We'll hire him for 1 episode. That's what we've been told. So that's why he was now 3 months into the shoot. He was going to be Tony Clifton. So now we show up. This is now, October 4th. This is Wednesday morning, and Richie Frangi's there, and Jimmy Burrows tells us, Ed called Andy last night and said, we have to fire your friend Tony. This is exactly what we were told. We have to fire your friend Tony. He said, okay, I understand, but you have to do it in person. You have to do it. So Jimmy Burrows says to us, look, expect the unexpected. I don't know what's going to happen. So now, all of a sudden, after lunch, out of nowhere, here comes Tony Clifton from the back of the house with the 2 hookers, 1 on each arm, going like, hey, where's the director? Come on, I got a contract here. We're going to rehearse. What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. Ed Weinberger clears his throat. Tony Danza and I start noticing that there's people filling in the bleachers, which was unusual for that time of day on a Wednesday. And all of a sudden, Ed Weinberger clears his throat and says, like, Tony, I'm sorry, but you're going to be fired. Blah, blah. And he goes, what? No, and he starts screaming, like, I'm a bigger star than all of you, blah, blah, blah. And so Judd, who's sitting next to me at this point, he goes, the guy wants a psychodrama. He wants a psychodrama. That's what he wants. He goes, you think you're the only one with a contract here? You think that's it? And all of a sudden, the 2 of them like start going at it, and we're like, oh no. And pretty soon, you've got 2 guards dragging Tony Clifton out. And he's like, I'm the biggest star in Hollywood, and screaming and screaming and this and that. I'll show you all in this. And they drag him out of the thing. And that was it. And that was like, what was that? But it was crazy performance art. Some people were filming. Tony's got a copy of it someplace. And there were people in the stands, and it was like, that's what he did. That's the performance artist that he was. And then the following week, Andy came back. It was like a couple weeks later. Andy came back, and he said to me, I could tell you're mad at me. And I said, yeah, because you don't piss on the actors. And he said, yeah, but don't you see the beauty in this guy? Don't you see that he's really like a beautiful character? I said, no, I don't. I love you, but I don't like Tony. I don't like Tony at all. And I think Jim Brooks put it the best, because when we all hung out together in Thanksgiving that year, he said, an artist can paint. He can paint all he wants, but he can't paint on other artists. You don't paint on the actors. So that's the true story of what happened.
So did Andy ever acknowledge being Tony Clifton?
He talked around it. You never got him to totally admit it. He just would say, don't you see the beauty in that guy? Things like that.
So let's just talk briefly. Did you have to do a lot of publicity for the show?
Oh, we did a lot of publicity. I think that I had a publicist, and it was my first time. So I was in Emmy Magazine. I did, other things. I would go on talk shows. I went on, throughout the run of the show, I did a lot of publicity for the show. I'd go on The Tonight Show, or I'd go on David Letterman, or, things like that. In fact, the week that I shot, this just flew into my head, the week that I shot Nardo Loses Her Marbles, that's the first time I was on The Tonight. That's the first time I met David Letterman, on August the 22nd. Had a white outfit on, and I met him, and he was the host. Yeah, now I started going on The Tonight Show and just kept going on every couple months for the show. Yeah.
What was that experience like?
It was great. I like publicity. I think it's a necessary part of what we do, and it helps people get to know you. We didn't, because there was no social media, so you couldn't know what somebody's Instagram or what their personalities were like from the things that they post on Twitter. So it was a good way for the audience to get to know you as a person outside of the project.
So then, 1982, ABC cancels Taxi.
Yes.
How did you find out?
ABC. I was at the Pilates class. I get the call from Jim Brooks, and he says, they canceled us, honey. And I could not believe it. It was just such a shock. But see, our producers were having some fights with the upper brass anyway. I think they were pretty autonomous and liked to do their own thing, and I think we never got the respect. They kept moving us around. We came in number 4 for the year, the first couple seasons. We were like way up there, because it was Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Three's Company, Taxi, and then Starsky and Hutch. So we were in that like Tuesday night lineup for the first couple of years, and then they put us on Wednesday, then they put us on Thursday. So when Jim Brooks called, it was on Tuesday, May the 4th of 1982. He called me and he said, they canceled us, honey. And I said, where were we all meeting? Or May 3rd. He said, where are we all meeting? And I said, he said, come to my office. So I finished my Pilates class. I come to the office. Jim's already a little drunk, and he's on the phone with Michael Fuchs, talking about possibly Taxi going on HBO. And he looks at me and he said, I'm talking to Michael Fuchs. If we're on HBO, he said, the first thing we're going to show is your naked tits, just to let them know we're on cable now. I was like, what? I hope we stay, some CBS or NBC picks us up. But anyway, we had what we call the wake. So we literally hung out in Jim Brooks' office like for hours, and then everything moved over to Tony Danza's house, and we had this little taxi. It was kind of like a cookie jar flower pot kind of thing, and we put it out like it was a little wake, and there were flowers in it and everything else. And the wake went on for like 24 hours, Well, it turned out that a week and a half later, on May 15th, Saturday night, May 15th, Danny was hosting Saturday Night Live. And because we had never taken our final bow, they decided that what we would do is come on during his monologue. So Danny comes out in the monologue. They flew us all to New York, and Danny comes out for his monologue, and he says, they canceled Taxi, you know, and he does this little, they did a little video of his blowing up ABC. It's like, rah! You know, and then he goes like, he does that famous Louis thing. So, so they canceled Taxi, so we came out to take our final bow. Well, it turns out that Grant Tinker, who had just taken over NBC at the time, was so impressed with how much the cast, the camaraderie, how much they loved each other. He was so close to Jim and the guys anyway, Jim Brooks and the guys anyway, that I left, like the following week, I left May 20th to go to the Cannes Film Festival because my husband at the time, I was married to Frederick Forrest at the time, we had a film that was opening there called Hammett. So while I'm doing Hammett, I got the call saying NBC had picked us up. You know, while I was at the Cannes Film Festival, they said NBC had picked us up. So I knew that we were going back to work. And he said, and Wally Shawn is somewhere, you know, running around Cannes if you get to see him. You know, tell him we want him for an episode. Well, I didn't run into Wally Shawn at Cannes, but then later in the month, or actually in June the 25th, I should stop doing dates. Anyway, because that's anyway. So June, I walk into, I was in Bangkok with my husband who was shooting a movie there. I had traveled around Europe. Then I went to Bangkok and saw my husband, Frederick Forrest, and he's in this tiny little church up in the, you know, in Bangkok. And I walk in, and in the other makeup chair is Wally Shawn. And it was like, what? I was supposed to see you at Cannes, and now I didn't even know you were in this movie with Freddie. And I said, call Jim Brooks because they want you to do a Taxi. And then so Wally Shawn, he played Arnie, and he was the one I got fixed up with for the Schlegel. So, yeah.
So when the show moved to NBC, did you see any changes in it?
Well, you know, the big campaign was same time, better station. You know, same time, better station, because it was on Thursdays at 9:30. I think we felt like at least we had a year to say goodbye. It was in the toilet ratings-wise because NBC was not doing very well at all. Cheers was on, you know, at 9 o'clock. We kind of like took turns and stuff. But he, you know, I think that I think everybody wanted that last year. Everybody, I think we did some great shows that last year, and I think that, you know, we had an opportunity to sort of solidify ourselves and say goodbye. I really think so. I was sad. I thought, you know, I was surprised that the show got canceled again, but let's put it this way. The quality stayed really strong, but because of the ratings, I wasn't surprised when they canceled us the second time.
When you shot sure.
Water.
Other side, yeah. When you guys shot the finale, did you know that it was the last episode?
Oh, yeah. And we had a feeling. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was the kind of atmosphere on set?
Where's the party? No, I'd already been cast in a film called The Man Who Loved Women because I'd been auditioning for that for the last month. But it was, you know, my sister was out visiting me. It was in February of 1983, and it was just, you know, it was a great time. It was February 18th. And you know what's so funny? My taxi cab number, all the time, he'd say, Nardo 218, Nardo 218. And 218, February 18th, was our last shooting day. Isn't that weird?
It's a nice
sort of
little
prophetic
symmetry.
in a way.